We live in interesting times. For the headlines. Super Typhoon MANGKHUT, the biggest storm of the year, smashes through the Philippines, claiming its first victims as 2 women die when a rain-drenched hillside collapses on them and another drowns in Taiwan. Tropical storm Florence unleashes torrential flooding in the Carolinas and causes multiple deaths, including a woman and baby killed when a tree fell on their house. And NASA counts down to the launch of its $1 billion ISAT-2 mission, using advanced lasers to uncover the true depth of the melting of Earth's ice sheets. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And now to the news. Super Typhoon MANGKHUT, the biggest storm of the year, smashed through the Philippines on Saturday and claimed some lives. Reports said a woman was swept out to sea off Taiwan. Meanwhile, 2 other women were killed in a landslide in the city of Baguio. Police recovered the women's bodies from the soil and rubble after a hillside collapsed from the typhoon's heavy rains. The government warned against possible storm surges of up to 6 meters high and flooding and landslides. Meanwhile, this video you see here was taken by Eagle News correspondent Rowena Calaramo in Apayao, and it shows the wrath of the Typhoon Ompong, international name MANGKHUT, early Saturday morning at 5:35 a.m. or 5:35 September 15, as Pag-asa forecasted that Ompong was barreling towards Ilocos Norte and Apayao after making landfall in Baggao, Cagayan. Strong howling winds continued to batter provinces in northern Luzon on Saturday morning, and it made it difficult for responders to assess the damage and casualties from the typhoon. Power and communication lines are down in several areas. Edgar Posada, spokesperson of the NDRRMC, told an emergency meeting that about 5.2 million people were vulnerable to the most destructive effects near the typhoon's 78-mile eye. Nearly 48,000 houses in those in high-risk areas are made of light materials and vulnerable to MANGKHUT's winds. Meanwhile, the Department of Transportation reported that facilities at the TUGUEGARAO airport in Cagayan were damaged as Typhoon Ompong made its landfall Saturday. Take a look.
Dito po kami ngayon sa TUGUEGARAO.
Okay, TUGUEGARAO.
Na kung saan mapapalik-balik lang po namin sa aming pag-ikot. Kaninang mga 8:30 na kung saan nakita namin yung nasalantang airport, yung mga opisina doon, kasama na yung opisina ng TAP. Wala akong initially sa visual, wala namang kaming nakitang problema sa runway. So pag kita ng malalakas namin, papa-inspection namin ito para makita talaga kung meron damage yung runway. Pero sa unang pananaw, makikita na yung opisina, yung mga glasses so splintered, yung x-ray machine mukhang nabaksakan sa silid, yung mga computers basta nabaksakan, mukhang may problema. Ang prioridad ko namin ay i-restore agad ng yung communication, yung tinatawag na high frequency sa air to ground. Isipin po natin na ngayon walang kuryente dito. Kaya may kahirapan na makipag-communicate. Doon naman sa puerto, naman ang problema sa mga puerto dito sa Cagayan na hindi naman nagsasabing ganun ka-extensive ang nangyari dito sa airport sa TUGUEGARAO. Naghahanda kami ng mga report doon sa Pasto Airport, sama na ito yung lalo. Kasi po, walang kuryente ang communication pautay-utay at intermittent.
Okay. So, sa sinabi niyong pag-uulit, Sec Art, mukhang mananatiling sarado muna ang TUGUEGARAO, pero magagamit ba ho ang TUGUEGARAO Airport para sa delivery ng humanitarian assistance? Yung mga Air Force planes natin, po pwede ba hong lumapag dyan kung kinakailangan mag-deliver ng humanitarian assistance?
Napakaganda ng observation ho eh. Kaya inuna namin natignan yung paliparan sa yung mga daungan ng ating mga sasakyan. Sa amin ang pananaw, gamit po yung mga airport, yung mga puerto para sa connectivity.
Okay. So, ang pagbaha po, anong sitwasyon po dyan sa TUGEGARAO? Meron ba ho kayo nakitang pagbabaha sa syudad?
Doon ho sa amin mga pinuntahan, wala naman ho mga pagtubig-tubig. Pero yung bahang sasabihin mong deep or ambient deep, wala po namang mga sa naharap namin.
Yung mga nasirang mga kabahayan po, infrastruktura, halatang halata na ba ho yan? O...
Hindi ho, ito ho, tawag na made of light materials. Kaya yung makikita mo sa kalsada, at least doon sa mga napuntahan natin, marami yung mga debris sa yung mga light materials. So, ito na rin ho, na yung provincial provincial ho, natutuklap ng mga bubong, unti-unti natutuklap yung bubong. Ganon din ho, yun nangyari sa Mekong, natutuklap yung bubong.
Now, TUGADE went to his hometown of Cagayan to supervise ongoing preparations for the typhoon upon instructions of President Duterte. The department is also monitoring the condition of ports which may be utilized for the delivery of relief goods. It's also awaiting reports on the situation of other airports in northern Luzon, such as Basco in Batanes and Lalio in Cagayan. Some 112 local and international flights have been canceled due to the typhoon, according to the Department of Transportation. Meanwhile, the department will be issuing a truck ban exemption for trucks that will deliver relief goods for those affected by the typhoon in coordination with the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority. Meanwhile, flooding was reported in parts of Metro Manila early Saturday due to heavy rains caused by Typhoon Ompong. The Metropolitan Manila Development Authority said in an advisory that the following areas were flooded: Rojas Boulevard from the U.S. Embassy to Pedro Hill, gutter deep; Rojas Boulevard, Quirino Avenue to UN Avenue, northbound and southbound, half-tire deep; Andrews Avenue to Circulo del Mundo, eastbound and westbound, half-tire deep; and Araneta Victory, Cubao, tire deep. Tropical cyclone warning signal number 1 has been raised over Metro Manila according to the latest weather bulletin of Pagasa as of 8 a.m. Saturday. Ompong made landfall in Baggao, Cagayan at about 2 a.m. heading towards Apayao and Ilocos Norte. Meanwhile, the Department of Trade and Industry said they've been conducting price monitoring on basic necessities and prime commodities of goods even before the onslaught of Super Typhoon Ompong or MANGKHUT. Let's listen in.
Sa DTI, 1 week before Ompong, daily na ang monitoring namin at generally sa 5 provinces of the region. The findings of our monitoring is that supply is adequate. The prices of basic necessities and prime commodities are within the SRP. There was no observed panic buying. Actually, the supply level ranges from 2 to 3 weeks. What is unique that I can also report is in Batanes. They said, our staff there said that the cargo ship just arrived a week before. So they have no problem of supply yet, except for candles now. Basic necessities and prime commodities. Rice, they report that they have problem with NFA rice. Other type, okay lang sila sa rice. So, sinama na rin namin sa yung mga wet market, and that time, there was an observed a little adjustment in some of the prices. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're anticipating a price freeze. As of this morning, we have already fielded some of our people who can physically go there now. So the report is medyo kukunti ang nagbukas ngayon because of what happened. But the order from our director is daily monitoring of these basic necessities and prime commodities. There will be a price freeze upon the declaration of calamity. Yes, sir. Yeah, that will be our guide. Upon declaration, sir. Yes. The calamity, ang determinant dun yung declaration of calamity.
All right, meanwhile, houses and residents were affected by the massive flooding after the Chico River overflowed. Residents were evacuated to avoid the massive overflow of the river. These pictures you're looking at are from the taken by Aguila, or from reporter Freddy Rulyoda, who is on the ground. And he got this from the PDRRMO. The Chico River is a river system in the Philippines in the island of Luzon, encompassing the regions of Cordillera and Cagayan Valley. Now, the most extensive river in the Cordillera region, it covers the provinces of Mountain Province, Kalinga, and Cagayan. It is referred to as a river of life for the Kalinga people who live on its banks, and is well known among development workers because the Chico River Dam project, an electric power generation project which local residents resisted for 3 decades before it was finally shelved in the 1980s, a landmark case study concerning ancestral domain issues in the Philippines. All right, now let's get the latest weather update from Erlo Bringas, now at the Pag-asa Forecasting Center. Erlo, good evening.
Yes, Alma, good evening. As of 5 p.m. today, the Typhoon Ompong is still in the position of 160 kilometers west-northwest of Lawag City, with the maximum sustained winds at 160 kilometers per hour and a gustiness of 195 kilometers per hour, and still moving west-northwest at 25 kilometers per hour. Typhoon Ompong has weakened slightly as it moves in a west-northwestward in direction. Stormy weather is expected over the areas under typhoon warning signal number 2 and 3. The southwest monsoon habagat enhanced by the typhoon will bring gusty winds and with occasional moderate to heavy rains over western Visayas and Mimaropa, while scattered light to moderate at times that heavy rains will prevail over Bicol region and eastern and central Visayas. Residents in this area, especially those living near river channels, in low-lying areas and in mountainous areas, are advised to take appropriate actions against possible flooding, landslide, coordinate with local disaster risk reduction and management offices, and to continue for more updates. Alma, Pag-asa also advised fisher folks and those with small sea crafts are advised not to venture out over the seaboards of areas with warning signals in the seaboards of Luzon of Visayas. Ompong is expected to exceed the Philippine Area of Responsibility tonight. The still location of the IAT center of the Typhoon Ompong was located at available data at 160 kilometers west-northwest of Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, moving west-northwest at 25 kilometers per hour. By 24 hour from this time, 770 kilometers west-northwest of Lawag City, Ilocos Norte, 48 hours or Monday afternoon will located at 1,480 kilometers west-northwest of Lawag, Ilocos Norte. Tropical cyclone warning signal still in signal number 3 at 121 to 170 kilometers expected, at least 18 hours winds at Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union, Abra, Apayao, Kalinga, Mountain Province, Ifugao, and Benguet, with the wave height at the open sea at 14.0 meters. Tropical cyclone warning signal number 2 expected in 24 hours by 61 to 120 kilometers per hour winds, Batanes, Cagayan, including Babuyan Group of Islands, Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, Quirino, Pangasinan, Zambales, Tarlac, Pampanga, Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, and Aurora, with a wave height of 4.1 to 14 meters. Tropical cyclone warning signal number 1 at 60 kilometers per hour expected in 36 hours at Metro Manila, Bataan, Rizal, Cavite, Batangas, Laguna, Lubang Island, and Northern Quezon, including Polillo Island. The Public and Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council concerned are advised to take appropriate actions and watch for the next severe weather bulletin issued here at Pag-asa Weather Forecasting Center. We're still here to monitor all the happenings about the exit of Typhoon Ompong at the Philippine Area of Responsibility that expected tonight, Alma. Live here at the Pag-asa Weather Forecasting Center for Eagle News, I'm Erlo Bingas. I'm 1 with 25.
All right, thank you very much, Erlo Bringas. Meanwhile, President Duterte will be flying to areas affected by Typhoon Ompong as soon as airport authorities give him the green light. Presidential Communications Operations Office Secretary Martin Andanar made this announcement in a press conference at the National Disaster Risk and Management, Risk Reduction and Management Council or NDRRMC headquarters in Quezon City, and he noted that this information was relayed to him by the President's top aide, Christopher Bongo.
Ang ating mga radio stations po, oras na nagbigay po ng go signal, ang RAAP ay pupunta mismo, dediretso po ang Pangulo sa mga lugar kung saan may talagang napinsala nitong bagyong Ompong. Salamat po.
President Duterte is currently monitoring updates on disaster response operations. According to the Department of Transportation, the 3 major train lines in Metro Manila are now fully operational despite the LRT-1 experiencing power supply issues later in the day. The DOTR has also provided trucks and buses in regions 1 to 3 in case there's a need to transport relief goods and evacuees from other areas. Meanwhile, the Department of Public Works and Highways has deployed heavy equipment in areas affected by landslides, namely Nagilan, Quezon, and Marcos Highway. The Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez, for his part, assured that goods are still within the suggested retail price and there's adequate supply of rice in Baguio. Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Health is our most
visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
All right, so we're monitoring two weather systems, and one is in the U.S. And we're continuing to follow the news on the coast of the Carolinas as Hurricane Florence is now just sitting there, slowly walking along the coastline and battering cities along the way. Florence was downgraded to a tropical storm Friday, U.S. time. And we also got news that at least 5 people, including a mother and her infant, have died in North Carolina as Tropical Storm Florence slowly moved in the area. Here's Bernadette Rangini reporting from Greensboro, North Carolina.
Hurricane Florence made her entrance earlier this morning. Unfortunately, news of several fatalities have already been reported. First reported deaths was out of Wilmington, North Carolina, where a tree fell on a home, tragically taking the lives of a mother and her infant. Another resident was also injured in the home and taken to the hospital. Other reported fatalities include a man from Lenoir County who was reportedly electrocuted and a woman who suffered a medical incident. Here in Greensboro, although there's been very little rain, more rain is expected over the weekend as Hurricane Florence moves through the Carolinas. Reporting from Greensboro, North Carolina, I am Bernadette Rangini, and I am 1 with 25.
Thank you, Bernadette. So, as she said, a woman and her baby were killed when a tree fell on their house, and several more storm-related deaths were reported on Friday as Hurricane Florence slammed into the Carolinas, dousing the eastern U.S. states with torrential rain and causing rivers to burst their banks. Take a look. Now, 4 deaths were confirmed by officials as U.S. media reported another, so 5 in all. Neighbors described shock and heartbreak after that mother and her infant child were killed when the tree fell on their house in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Well, the power just went out about 6:30. Lights have been flickering up until then. Not long after that, I heard what I thought was a loud pop. I came to my door to see what I could make out anything, and it was still pitch black at that time. It was very dark. All you could see was wind and waters, leaves and stuff. And about an hour or so after that, I came out and saw the lights of the rescue workers and figured something had gone on. I looked over there, and they had been working diligently for hours trying to get those people out of there. It's been a long day for everyone. But we were all preparing and stocking up. I know there's some stocking up as well. So who can really prepare for something like this? It's the worst case scenario. Nobody wants this. Nobody.
Yeah, I saw the, I think it was the aunt and a niece and nephew. Yeah, they just, got here and I guess they've already heard what had happened or whatever, and just seeing the devastation, it was just, I don't know, seeing them come out was just heartbreaking. Me and my girlfriend, it really sad morning.
Hundreds of people needed to be rescued after becoming trapped in their homes by a storm surge of up to 10 feet or 3 meters in New Bern, a town of 30,000 in North Carolina at the confluence of the Trent and Neuse rivers. As of 8 p.m. local time, Florence was downgraded to a tropical storm by the National Hurricane Center, but authorities warned that danger was far from over, predicting life-threatening storm surges and strong winds would persist through the night. Now, some parts of North Carolina have already seen surges as high as 10 feet in places.
Hurricane Florence is powerful, slow, and relentless. It's an uninvited brute who doesn't want to leave. But I'll tell you, this one is so widespread, you're going to have a hard time finding a North Carolinian who is not going to be affected by this storm in some way. The storm surge alone has overwhelmed the city of New Bern. Overnight, there are over 100 swiftwater rescues in this great city, and we expect more.
Now, the storm originally made landfall at Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina on Friday morning as a Category 1 hurricane. The slow-moving storm can bring 8 months' worth of rain. More than 20,000 residents have packed into North Carolina emergency shelters, and officials have told those still in the storm's path to stay in place. In Jacksonville, North Carolina, officials had rescued more than 60 people overnight on Thursday from a hotel that was collapsing in the storm. Now, parts of New Bern, North Carolina, which is home to 30,000 people, were 10 feet underwater on Friday after local rivers flooded their banks, and officials said Hurricane Florence will pose significant threats for the next days.
24 to 36 hours remain of a significant threat from heavy rain, heavy surge, not just in North Carolina, but obviously down as we move into South Carolina. There are many areas that are currently, in the heart of the storm, and there are many areas that will be as the day moves through today, tomorrow, and through the weekend. As you know, there are certain areas that...
Now, evacuation warnings were issued for 1.7 million people in the region. Almost 800,000 people are reported to be without power already in North Carolina, and officials have warned restoring electricity would take days or even weeks. Meanwhile, firefighters in one Wilmington neighborhood working to rescue family members after the tree fell on their home, injuring at least one person when Hurricane Florence swept through. Take a look.
We had a very large tree that fell on the back of this house during the height of the storm. As you can see, we're still in the backside winds of this storm. We've got multiple firefighters out here doing a rescue operation, and we did transport one victim to the hospital. They've been phenomenal all across our system. These firefighters have been out. I was telling somebody earlier, we have a policy that we stop when the winds get to sustained 50 miles an hour, but we've never been able to stop. People's lives have been in jeopardy all night. The firefighters have been out there dealing with it.
And staying in the U.S., President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, agreed to cooperate in the special counsel investigation of possible electoral collusion with Russia. In a plea deal to avert a second trial on money laundering and illegal lobbying charges, Manafort agreed to plead guilty to one count of conspiracy against the U.S. and another count of obstruction of justice. Manafort could eventually be sentenced to up to 10 years in prison as part of the deal and will forfeit 4 real estate properties worth millions of dollars, as well as bank accounts and a life insurance policy. A lawyer for Manafort, Kevin Downing, told reporters outside the court that his client wanted to make sure that his family was able to remain safe and live a good life.
It's a tough day for Mr. Manafort, but he's accepted responsibility, and he wanted to make sure that his family was able to remain safe and live a good life. He's accepted responsibility, and this is for conduct that dates back many years, and everybody should remember that. So thank you, everyone.
The agreement avoids a second trial on money laundering and other charges. The White House insists the guilty plea has absolutely nothing to do with President Trump. Manafort was convicted last month on 8 counts of fraud, bank fraud, and failing to disclose bank accounts. Now, that was the first criminal trial arising from the Justice Department's investigation into alleged interference by Russia in the 2016 election. However, the charges only relate to Manafort's political consulting with pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine, largely predating his role with the Trump campaign. Manafort, 69 years old, worked for Trump's presidential campaign for 5 months in 2016 and was in charge when Mr. Trump clinched the Republican Party nomination. In a statement, White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders said on Friday, this had absolutely nothing to do with the president or his victorious 2016 presidential campaign. It is totally unrelated. President Trump has branded the Mueller investigation a witch hunt and insisted there was no collusion between his team and Russia. The Kremlin has also repeatedly denied any meddling. The news continues here on Eagle News International. We'll be right back.
Festival is calling for submission of video entries. The theme is Everyday Heroes. Winners will represent the Philippines. Deadline is on September 21. For details, visit or contact the following.
For business news, this is Cesar Vallejos. The value of the peso dropped past 54 to $1 on Wednesday, the lowest in almost 13 years, as sentiment toward the currency remained bearish due to an ongoing rout against emerging market currencies and a stubbornly high local inflation rate. On the foreign exchange market, the peso ended the trading session at 54.13 to $1, which was less than 3 centavos off the low of 54.15 set on December 2, 2005. Wednesday's drop came despite a decision of the central bank to reactivate a dollar hedging mechanism introduced during the 1997 East Asian financial crisis and used heavily during the financial markets turmoil in the lead up to former President Estrada's resignation in 2001 in a bid to cushion the currency's drop. BSP Governor Nestor Espinilla Jr. said the currency risk protection program would be made available to eligible corporations with foreign exchange obligations based on more liberalized rules. With this scheme, regulators hope that large corporations with future dollar needs would not rush to buy them early, thus aggravating the peso's weakness. Last week, the BSP chief warned that regulations would take all actions necessary against speculative activity by market participants who have pushed the currency lower in recent weeks. The peso's weakness is expected to persist until next year, given a widening current account deficit coupled with a wider budget deficit cap, London-based Oxford Economics said. The Economic Development Cluster will submit to the Office of the President a draft executive order removing the administrative constraints and non-tariff barriers on the importation of fish, rice, sugar, meat, and vegetables, Malacanang said. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque Jr. said in a palace briefing on Wednesday that this would mean that the draft order meant simplifying the process of food importation. The EDC last week unveiled measures to ease high food prices after August inflation surged to a 9-year high of 6.4%, bringing the year-to-date inflation at 4.8%. The August inflation is beyond the upper end of central bank's forecast range of 5.5 to 6.2%. According to Roque, among the short-term policy recommendations listed by EDC include immediate release of 4.6 million sacks of rice available in warehouses of the National Food Authority to the market across the country and allocation of 2.7 million sacks of rice to Zamboanga, Basilan, Sulu, and Tawi-Tawi. Import 5 million sacks of rice which arrive over the next 1 month, 1.5 months, and another 5 million sacks early next year, simplifying and streamlining the licensing procedures for rice imports of the NFA, forming monitoring teams for surveillance of rice from ports to NFA warehouses and outlets, urging the Senate to immediately pass the rice tariffication bill within the month, allowing fish imports to be distributed in Metro Manila and other markets in the country, setting up public markets where producers can sell directly to the end customer, as well as provide cold storage facility for this purpose, simplifying procedures to allow importation of sugar to direct users to moderate cost to consumers, improve logistics, transport, distribution, and storage of vegetables, which would reduce prices. Local fast food giant Jollibee Foods Corporation said it is set to open its first flagship Jollibee stores in 3 different milestone locations: the United Kingdom, Manhattan in the US, and Macau in China, as part of its global expansion plans. The company said the expansion is part of the company's plan to even out the share of domestic to international sales. The first Jollibee store in the UK will have its grand opening on October 20. A few weeks before that, the Macau branch will hold its grand opening on September 28. On top of serving Filipinos overseas, the company said it has been the success of Jollibee in catering to local markets. All of its customers in Vietnam and Brunei Darussalam are locals. Jollibee is the fastest growing chain in Vietnam. It is one of the top fast food chains in Brunei, in Hong Kong, and Singapore, where it has added more stores. More than half of its customers are locals, the company said. In 2013, Jollibee became the #1 restaurant company in Asia in terms of market capitalization and is now the world's largest Asian restaurant company. The fast food giant is now aiming to be among the top 5 largest restaurant companies in the world in terms of market capitalization. Apple unveiled 3 new iPhones on Wednesday, including its biggest and most expensive model yet, as the company seeks to widen the product's appeal amid slowing sales. CEO Tim Cook showed off the iPhone XS Max, which has been a bigger screen than the one on last year's dramatically designed model, the iPhone X. It will cost about $1,100, topping the iPhone X, which at $1,000 seemed jaw-dropping at the time. An updated iPhone X, now called the XS, stays at $1,000 US. As with the iPhone X, both new phones have screens that run from edge to edge, an effort to maximize the display without making the phone too awkward to hold. The Max model looks to be about the size of the iPhone 8 Plus, though the screen size is much larger. The iPhone XS Max, which will be available on September 21 with orders open the week before, represents Apple's attempt to feed consumers' appetite for increasingly larger screens as they rely on smartphones to watch and record video and take photos wherever they are. By making more expensive iPhones, Apple has been able to boost its profits despite waning demand as people upgrade phones less frequently. iPhones fetched an average price of $724 during the April-June period, a nearly 20% increase from a year earlier. Apple also showed off a cheaper iPhone called the iPhone XR. It has a traditional lower quality screen and an aluminum body. It's physically smaller than the iPhone 8 Plus, but has a bigger screen. It will cost roughly $750 and will come out on October 26. All three new models join the iPhone X in getting rid of the home button to make room for more screen. They will have facial recognition technology to unlock the device.
iPhone XS, you just pick up your iPhone, look at it, it recognizes your face.
Volkswagen announced last of its iconic Beetle compact cars with roll-off assembly lines in 2019. While there will be 2 special models manufactured before production ceases, it's the original Bug that still generates the most emotion among its fans. Known in many parts of the world as the Bug, the 2-door rear-engine car was first manufactured in 1938. Volkswagen's plans to shelve the car come as the American branch of the car maker turns its focus to mass-market electric vehicles and larger family-oriented cars. Globally, it is struggling to recover from Dieselgate scandal, which broke in 2015 and brought with it legal claims totaling billions. But Chief Executive of Volkswagen Group of America, Heinrich Schwab, can open the door to reviving the model at some point, saying never say never. Volkswagen plans to offer the 2 final edition models in both coupe and convertible styles. The company said the cars will include nods to earlier versions and be priced at $23,045 US and up. Before production ceases, the company will offer US customers 2 special models, the final edition SE and the final edition SEL, starting at roughly $23,000 US. Participants in a panel on the geopolitics of trade agreed at a session of the World Economic Forum on ASEAN agreed that ASEAN unity and economic integration are the key factors for its members as trade tensions between the United States and China escalate. Ignatius Tara-Leking, Minister of International Trade and Industry of Malaysia, said that we need to start taking the opportunity of what was already built several years ago, and that is ASEAN.
That ASEAN should start thinking about consolidating together once more, talking less of being Thanos, taking away the Thanos in us, because at the end Thanos did die, by the way. So we need to take away that greed about our own selves, and we need to start taking opportunity of what was already built several years ago, and that is ASEAN. We have +6. We have the other nations that are working with ASEAN as well. So we can create an economy through ASEAN where we can cushion all the effects of this uncertain American and Chinese trade war. And how do we begin? Where do we start? I would propose that during the ASEAN meeting, the leaders of ASEAN, the economic ministers as well as the head of states, should just say, okay, enough of all the talk about our own country or the deficit of our country, where some countries say, oh, we are least developed than you, or we are more developed than you. Forget about that in ASEAN. Work as a singular ASEAN as an economy. Work as a singular ASEAN to trade between ourselves and make it seamless between ourselves. So that could, and not 100%, but that could probably reduce the impact that is forthcoming because of this tariff war.
That being said, Darrell, the regional diversity that makes up the RCEP membership, or I should say the potential RCEP membership,
yes,
could potentially be something of a stumbling block, because a lot of these countries are at very, very different stages of their economic development. How will the negotiators square that circle?
The negotiators should have in their mind the idea during RCEP discussion that the intention is to prosper thy neighbor. If all our neighbors prosper together, whereby we help each other, whereby we input to each other on how to develop their country into similar, equal status as the others, then we'll be all right. We'll do all right.
And if there's $60 billion of trade into US...
Alan Bullard, Executive Director of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Secretariat Singapore, said it was unclear how far relations might deteriorate given the direction of global trade.
The impact that is forthcoming.
And if there's $60 billion of trade into US with 25% tariff and vice versa, and a threat of $200 billion of trade under tariff of that sort. That's, I don't know where trade friction becomes trade war, but it doesn't look very good at all. We can move back from some of that, but that's the way it's looking at the moment. And I hope we'll be able to talk about some of the ongoing effects, because it's not just US and China. There's some very big currents right around this region coming from that.
Back in 1970s, 1980s,
However, Yasuo Tanabe, Senior Vice President and Senior Corporate Officer at Hitachi Japan, said there are solutions.
You know, what's happening now between US and China is a kind of deja vu to me. So there are certain solutions. Back in 1970s, 1980s, we often pressured by the US with the Super 301, so kind of gunboat operation. And we negotiated on many issues, almost all sectors. And we ended up, in most cases, sometimes voluntary export restraint, or sometimes voluntary import expansion program by private sectors. So that kind of things, that time, say 30 years ago, have worked to soothe the calm the situation.
100%, but that could probably.
Beyond boosting intra-ASEAN trade to help protect the bloc from global disruption, Bullard pointed out that current circumstances have seen other countries step up to take the lead in major trade agreements, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and may encourage others to follow suit.
So we can create...
I mean, best possible that we see some of the policies that have been put in place being pulled back, that we see the current account deficit of the United States, that, well, actually, it's the merchandise trade deficit with a focus on the manufacturing sector, to be precise. We see that particular deficit against China, because that's the one that's the really big one, pulling back, but it's not happening at the moment. And we're going through a period when, after all, we are seeing a bipolar world move into a multipolar one, and that's been happening. Who would have thought that Japan would have taken leadership of the TPP? I would never have thought that would happen. It has happened. Is it possible that India could do the same thing on RCEP?
We're close.
What should we or should the WTO do? The Doha round's not going anywhere. It should be focused on plurilateral initiatives, so particular sectoral advances that can work amongst particular groups of countries that are willing to meet and do that. Information technology agreement, environmental goods arrangement, those sort of things. As for disputes, it's a big, big problem, and I don't know how that gets solved.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sure we can continue this discussion over.
That's it for Business and ASEAN News. This is Cesar Vallejos, and I'm 1 with 25. Eagle News International will be back. Stay with us.
Health is our most important asset, and it should
Welcome back. NASA counted down Saturday to the launch of its $1 billion ISAT-2 mission, using advanced lasers to uncover the true depth of the melting of Earth's ice sheets. The mission will inform sea level rise forecasts and is exceptionally important for science, according to Richard Sloanaker, ISAT-2 program executive at NASA. The half-ton satellite should reveal unprecedented detail about the current thickness of ice at the vulnerable polar regions as the climate warms. The weather forecast was 100% favorable for the 40-minute launch window, opening at 8:46 a.m. local time on Saturday from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. The measurements will be extremely precise, down to the width of a pencil, according to team member Kelly Brunt. It has been nearly a decade since NASA had a tool in orbit to measure ice sheet surface elevation across the globe.
It's called ATLAS, the Advanced Topographic Laser Altimeter System.
ATLAS sends out small...
Meanwhile, new evidence continues to signal that the number of hungry people in the world is growing. It reached 821 million in 2017, or 1 in every 9 people, and that is according to the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World 2018.
Unfortunately, the big news are not good news. This is what we can see. We need to say that again, it's the third time for me to announce an increase on the hunger number of people in the world. Now we achieve 821 million people that are considered undernourished in 2017. Really, not only like as conflicts responsible to increase, but the impact of climate change is so powerful nowadays on food that we are stepping behind. We are reversing the positive trends that we have seen along the decade on reducing the nourished people and also providing a better nutrition.
Sustainable diet.
The UN also said that climate change is having a negative effect on global agriculture and is driving up the number of hungry people around the world.
Every 5 seconds, a child is dying from starvation. But those of you in the media, you have an obligation to help us get this message out around the world. Because every 5 seconds, a child is dying from starvation. And when there's $300 trillion worth of wealth in the world today, that's unacceptable and it's inexcusable. But climate impact is real. 22 to 23 million people alone were impacted and forcibly displaced because of change in climate.
Changes that are going on in the
The report also calls for greater efforts to build climate resilience through policies that promote climate change, adaptation, and mitigation and disaster risk reduction. The report was launched by 5 UN agencies, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, the World Food Programme, the United Nations Children's Fund, and the World Health Organization.
Atlas sends out small pulses of laser light 10,000 times a second. And by measuring precisely how long it takes that light to go from the spacecraft down to the Earth and back up to the...
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Health is our most important asset.
MTRCV ang mag-provide na appropriate ratings sa lahat ng TV shows. Para ugaliin ng pamilya ang responsableng panonood. Teamwork tayo, parents!
Rated G, good for all. Oops, rated PG.
Dapat may mga magulang para sagutin ang mga tanong ng kabataan.
Sabi, rated SPG, maselan!
Itan ang paggabay.
Pag rated MTRCV, rated responsable.
Welcome back. Christie's will auction the painting Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures by David Hockney in its November sale of post-war and contemporary art. The masterpiece from 1972 is valued in the region of $80 million and could become the most expensive piece of art by a living artist ever sold at an auction. Take a look.
David Hockney Portrait of an Artist. This painting is generally considered to be one of the most important, but also one of the most beautiful paintings that the artist has done in his career, during his long life and his long career. There's biographical references in this painting that many other paintings don't have. They are about meeting other people, they are about friends, lovers, but this one is really close to him, and it gets really close to himself.
Superheroes, villains, and cosplayers flock to Africa's first Comic-Con, being held over 3 days in Johannesburg. Take a look.
All right, move.
Well, you get to dress up and be someone else for a day, and I think that's pretty awesome. You get to be your favorite person, and I think dressing up, I never pass up a chance to dress up.
Hey, what are you doing? Good, just man. Good to see you. It's really amazing that it's actually come to South Africa. You can see how popular it is today. Tickets are sold out on the whole weekend, so it's really amazing. Also the celebs and the type of people that are coming through. And the cosplay, of course.
All right, and that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm always one with 25. Good night.